of my CMU colleagues. I welcome you. And of course, we especially want to welcome Peter Boatwright. So Peter is Alan D. Shocker Professor of Marketing and New Product Development in the Tepper School of Business. He's also founder and director of the Integrated Innovation Institute, which appeals to me a lot. Anyway, I don't want to take time up, Peter, so go ahead and launch into your beautiful slides.
Well, thank you, George. And again, thanks to those of you who came. I'm going to move myself to the bottom corner to not block a lot of the slide images. It's good to be back, even if virtually. I know all of us are looking forward to being back together like before. Hopefully the world gets there soon. But in the meantime, this is at least better than not getting together. So I'm glad we could do this. So thanks for taking time. This is a set of kind of instructions that I think are maybe standard for some of you. And so side-by-side view, that way you can see others on screen, but also see the slides. It's nicer to see you live rather than your name on screen. So those of you who have enough bandwidth and don't have distracting environments you're in, maybe turn on your videos. Thanks for being muted for now. And then the recording will be available later. Also, there's a chat. And so some of you have chatted in. Cecile, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you taking time, but use that chat window and I will definitely take some questions at the end. I've allotted some time. And hello, Mike Trick, for showing up. Thanks for taking time. I customarily put in a plug for the Integrated Innovation Institute into my talks. I'll be brief because last time I told you about this. We have master's degrees in innovation. So we have 3 master's degrees. In Pittsburgh, we have one that's focused on products and services in general. And then we have at our Silicon Valley campus, software innovation degree. And then we have a degree that we call bicoastal. It sounds good marketing. Pittsburgh's not on the coast, but it still sounds good. And so students start and get a master's in an engineering field in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, and then go and get a second master's. It's a dual degree. They go to Silicon Valley and study ventures in Silicon Valley, a great place to learn about launching technology ventures. So if any undergrads are present, or if you advise undergrads, certainly we would welcome our Carnegie Mellon students from Qatar. Just one more blip on our Pittsburgh degree. It mixes engineering, design, and business. So we cross-train students because those are the fundamentals of any product or service, and we're focused not on technology innovation or art innovation or science innovation, but products and services to create value in the marketplace. All right, that was my advertisement. And now we'll go into my content for today. So the topic, you saw some generic title selected pricing topics. Today, I'm just bringing to you content that's related to what I'm teaching this micro, and I'm bringing to you certain aspects that I just find interesting for whatever reason. And so it's, I don't know, they don't necessarily connect to one another. And so the first one I put up here is, doesn't the market set prices? Which that's what economics tells you, and it's right. The market sets prices, but it does beg the question of why in the world would you have a pricing class where you're teaching people about setting prices when people don't set prices? The market sets prices. And of course, now there's going to be a question about, well, when do you do which? But let's first explore this. The way I explore this in class is using a game. And this is a game that was published in the literature, and professors all over use this because it is very illustrative. Students, in essence, act out a trading experience. Each buyer, if you're physically present, like I have been in other years, you pass out, oh, excuse me, I didn't turn my phone on mute. I do that so I'm not distracted. There. If you're together, you can give people a physical card with a number on it that gives them their budget if they're buying, and give sellers a number that's their cost, and give them the instruction that they can't pay more than their budget. They don't have that money. Buyers and sellers say that, you know, you have to make money, you can't lose money, you need to sell above costs. And the literal idea in a physical classroom is like a pit trading. Get everybody in the same room, they get loud, they wander around, they're trying to buy and sell, and it gets noisy, but it's energetic and fun. And eventually the market clears. There's a few leftover people who their budget was too low and they didn't happen to find somebody who was able to sell that low, etc. Digitally, I was able to adapt this, made signs for all of our CMUQ students who were in my class on Saturday. They held up signs to their screen. They put their WhatsApp number in their Zoom so that they could WhatsApp each other their bids, and then it worked out. What didn't work out as well is I forgot how small classes are in Doha. And so there was like 3 trades per round. One time we got 4, one time we got 2. So I showed them some numbers that I'll show you from a class that was larger, just to give them a sense of what happens to have large numbers market clear instead of idiosyncratic. I think the lesson still went through. You adapt. So here's a price sequence from a larger class, so not Saturday's class. And so this is the kind of thing that, and I'll capture the real sequence for the students. And then they stare at this and they see that, yeah, prices vary, but there is some sort of equilibrium. There's kind of a pull where lots of prices in this case look like they're $6, $5, maybe $6.50, somewhere in this range of 5 to 7 is frequently where they are. And then I ask students about why are prices there? And generally they tell me all sorts of reasons. It's in the middle, it's the average. And then I work them back to supply and demand. So if we go over here to the left side of the screen, I reveal to them how many people are buyers who could actually pay a price of 4. And these are some numbers that I had in that class that year that I showed you the plot on. So it turned out a number of people with budgets or with cards last year in my MBA class, there were 9 of them that could pay $4. There were 8 of them who could pay 5 because one of their budgets was 4. They couldn't pay 5, they could only pay 4. There were 7 of them who could pay 6, and so forth. So that's the demand curve, and that happens to be plotted in red over in the graph. And then the same thing as I tell them, look, there's a bunch of people with cards who have costs and supply, and how many of them, if the price is 4, how many of them could actually supply it at that? Their costs are low enough. Well, there were only 3 people in the room who had that. And then at a price of 5, there are 4, and so forth. And so I map out the cost. And so then I show them that where just like econ class teaches them, where supply and demand cross, that's where the market kind of pushes prices. And that's why we observe that kind of prices between 5 and 7 roughly. So that's a good aha. And that's telling them, yes, the market sets prices. And then there's a pause. And then I ask them, tell me about the products that you sold and bought. And they think for a minute and they realize they didn't have any products they were selling and buying. They were just buying and selling, and just for the fun of the trade. And the point is not that there was nothing. The point is that their products and services are identical. There's no reason to trade with one student over another student, because it's all, whatever this imaginary product is, it's the same as everybody else's. And so this is the key takeaway, is that pretty much every business class emphasizes differentiation. That's one of their favorite words in our undergrad business groups, and for good reason. But I point out here in pricing class, if you're not differentiated, you don't get to set prices. The market sets prices. You're just like everybody else. And so as a career move, I say, try to work for a firm that has some differentiation. You work for a business which is commodity-like, it's not the most enjoyable environment, or not necessarily. So that's one little takeaway for the future. But the other takeaway is that all the pricing techniques that we're talking about only apply, in essence, to differentiated products, or really most products and services have some overlap with competitors. So we're really only talking about pricing a portion of it, and so that's the setting, that's the context, which is really helpful, because when I'm talking about pricing, often I'm talking about economic value, and I go through some techniques, and they say, but wait a minute, is that how people really do it? But we talk about most of the products and services they're familiar with, we'll say grocery products, etc. There's not a whole lot of differentiation. There's a slight bit. So a lot of the examples they're familiar with are more very common products that are very mature in the marketplace. And so it helps them understand how to take the pricing teachings in context. So that was the first topic that I like. So I thought I would share with you. The second topic is, it's very simple. It's the profit equation. It points out the value of pricing, the importance of pricing, because pricing directly affects the revenues coming in. And so this is a critical class. The piece, though, that I often remind people of here is that it's that center bullet section. For the buyer, for the customer, for that end user, you can think of their profit equation. When they're buying a product, they're getting some benefits for that product, and they're paying a price. That price is really counterbalances everything they're getting out of that product. So if you have too high of a price, they're not getting enough benefit, they're not buying. So it really shows, again, kind of highlights how important it is to set the price, because firms spend an immense amount of money creating those benefits. That's what their products and services are. It's this package of benefits. And they can undo all that work if they're not setting prices correctly. So this is highlighting to me the importance of pricing. So that's Peter's enjoyable topic for himself, number 2, and I hope you're also enjoying some of these. Number 3 is really the impact of contribution margin. This is what I'm focusing on, because it changes the business dramatically. So what I have on the left column, or the left bar chart, is low contribution. Low contribution really means low profits, if you want to think about it that way. So I have relative to the right bar column, I have high costs per unit, per item that you're selling. And then I have a price. And so there's a small amount of space at the top of that chart, at the top of that bar. And so you're not making a whole lot of money per item that you sell. And then on the right side, the example here is you're making a lot more money per item that you're selling, because your costs are much lower on that bar. And so you're making a lot of money. One thing here is the word contribution. Normally when I'm speaking with people in normal everyday terms, jargon, I'd say profits. How much money are we making? We're making profits. it's good to switch to this word contribution because it's a reminder that every product that a company sells is bringing in a chunk of revenue, but it's not necessarily covering all the costs, because there's the fixed portion. We'll just say there's the CEO's salary. And the CEO's salary, how do you dole that out among all the products, and how is that incorporated into the profit of just one product? That's an accounting issue, and I'll leave that to the accountants to decide when you do what. But it's good to recognize that each of these products, if you're thinking of them as standalone, not necessarily capturing the whole picture. You're contributing to the whole, and let's recognize we play a small part. So that's the word contribution. But that's not the fun of this. So the low versus high, some examples. High contribution examples often are things where the fixed costs are high. Hotel rooms. Think of it this way. If you have an empty hotel room, you as a hotel still, you already paid for that room. The cost of putting some additional person in that room is pretty small relative to the revenues. I mean, there's a booking, there's, they take a little bit of time with the desk attendant, then there's cleaning. But then they pay, whoever is staying in that room pays a decent fee, quite a bit over and above what the true costs are of just that one night of stay or the 2 nights of stay. So per person, per room sold, we would think of that as a high contribution business. You can think airline seats, similar. That airline's traveling, they're spending that money on jet fuel no matter what. Fill an extra seat, even if you only charge them $10, that's $10 more than you paid otherwise. Oh, that maybe not cover the snacks. $20. Right? If you're gonna have empty seats, you might as well fill them. And so high contribution. Software licenses be another example. It's all the work that comes up front, especially distributing that software via the internet. It's costless, pretty close. So there's no materials that you're spending. So high contribution on a per item. And then hitting close to home, university students. A lot of our classes, you can fit yet one more student. With COVID, if our desks are all spread out 6 feet, that erodes this example, but let's go back to traditional times. That fitting one more student, the costs don't really go up. Now there's step functions. Suddenly, after a while, you have to create a whole new section. So this is really locally. We think about just one more student. They bring in their tuition dollars, but the costs don't go up. So I'm going to call university a high contribution business. Low contribution business is another example. Grocery items, manufactured goods, anything where there's lots of materials. So grocery items, there's food, there's packaging, and you think of groceries as they need to be high volume to make money. You've heard that they have narrow margins. That's the same thing as saying low contribution. Cars, toys, there's plastic, there's steel, there's aluminum, electronics. All that stuff costs something, and they have to ship it, package it, sell it. So those are examples. I already talked about the first bullet. Where this gets to me interesting, what I enjoy about this is the difference in running these businesses. Low contribution is high volume. Your marketing goal, remember I'm a marketing professor, your marketing goal is getting lots of people to go through and repeat purchase. So that's your task, is keep people coming back, retention, frequency of purchase. If it's cars, you think of as retention. If it's grocery, because they're buying frequently, you can think of returning visits. That's a very different business than a high contribution, selling the software, getting somebody on that plane, because it's more of a one-off. As I mentioned earlier, was joking, the plane's traveling anyway, the jet fuel is being spent anyway. Just filling a seat for $20 is $20 more than you had otherwise. There's a lot of money that the company can spend because getting that extra sale, they're willing to discount a lot, or they're willing to spend a lot of advertising because they make so much per sale, per airline ticket, per university student. It's worth a lot of effort to get one more student. Applying this to one specific example, I've in the past taught a Netflix case. The Netflix case, one benefit of teaching students is they all are pretty much Netflix subscribers these days. It's a company they know, they enjoy, and you get that kind of, woohoo, I love Netflix. And then they get to read a little bit about the history of Netflix, and they don't know the history anymore. They get younger and younger each year, and they didn't live this era. But once upon a time, Netflix didn't stream. They mailed out DVDs to people who lived all over the United States. I don't know if Netflix shipped internationally. I don't remember that detail. But if you think about mailing out DVDs, there's little DVDs. That material that costs something, and they get scratched, and so you can only use them a certain number of times. So that's one part of it. Another part is the mailing fee. And Netflix actually negotiated their own unique deal with the post office on mailing. They mailed such high volume, they had their own pricing. They weren't a bulk mailer, they were Netflix. So that's one business. But then along came streaming as a technology. Now there's no cost per unit. When Netflix began to open up streaming, it was so different. They created a separate company. They had two brand names that they started with, because they couldn't have, in their minds, they couldn't even have the same people leading these businesses because they were so different. The case is really about how they priced, because they started off, back then, lots of things coming across the internet were free. And so they started off with very, very cheap streaming movies. And that set them up for, disappointment in the marketplace when they had to start charging for movies later, or charging more for movies for streaming, because everybody was accustomed to really cheap. But they had to charge more because the movie studios similarly started to figure out that they could make a lot of money by having these fixed fee licenses. So streaming, back on DVDs, it would be like Blockbuster, these old pay per use. So Netflix's charge was per copy of DVD, per DVD that they purchased, they paid the movie studios. For streaming, they buy a license for unlimited. Their cost structure is entirely different. Their profit's entirely different. So to me, the interesting thing here about contribution is these businesses are radically different. The other thing that in these differences that this is my number 4 item, is that I think is interesting is the impact on price wars. So if we think about high contribution customers, like in a cell phone arena, stealing your competition's customers is really lucrative until they retaliate and they steal yours. But so there's a lot of pressure in a high contribution business for price wars, because you can make so much from stealing somebody's customers. Price wars gets us to a famous context of prisoner's dilemma, because now you're stuck. You could be stuck in a very negative situation. So the way I did my little table, if you look at the blue and the red areas at the bottom, I'm thinking of the me if I price, the lower left-hand corner, and I'm looking at rows. If I price high, and we'll go all the other side, and my competitor prices high, we're making some money. I'm just going to call this a modest gain as a benchmark. So modest gain for me. Every entry in the table is me-centric. Now, if I price high and my competitor discounts, they get all the customers. Because the customers buy on price, and the customers go all to my competitor. They stole all of my customers, and I have a large loss. Oh, that's terrible. Now, if I price low and my competitor prices high, tough luck for them. I love it. I make a killing. all the customers come to me, I make money. But if we both price low, we're losing. Or we're, the way I'm gearing this is we're losing some money, small loss. And this is where the dilemma is that if I and my competitor could work together, it's commonly called collusion, which is largely illegal, but let's imagine we could work together. We'd be better off, because what happens is that there's a big pressure to end up where we're both trying to undercut each other and cheat, and we end up in a not so good situation, low profits, losses, etc. So the question is, how in the world, what are strategies, what are ways, legal ways, to where we can stay both making money, keeping prices high, instead of keeping prices low? One example that I find fascinating is price matching. So you can think of price matching as, Best Buy is an example in the United States, where you go to Best Buy to buy, let's say, a new television, your old one went out, and if you see the same TV over at Costco, and Costco has a lower price, you show that price to Best Buy, and they'll give you whatever Costco's charging. Price matching. The promise is you never have to pay more than any competitor. The company that price matches will match any price out there for, of course, the identical item. Now, this sounds like a great deal for me as a customer. Oh, I get low prices. It's awesome. Prices stay low. But the truth is, this is a technique to keep prices high. Why? Well, if I'm promising to all my competitors that I'm going to match their price, there's not a whole lot of incentive for them to discount their prices, because I'm going to discount mine simultaneously. All the customers can get the same price for me. And without a big incentive for them to discount, there's no reward. So on average, they're going to keep their prices on the higher side. And I'm going to keep my prices on the higher side because there's not much benefit to discount. And so this is a technique to keep prices high. This is really in the interest of the retailers, the sellers, even though it just looks like this should be in the interest of the buyer, me. So that's all comes from contribution margin. Last couple here are shorter. Price promotions for grocery. Now, during my PhD, I worked for Kraft Foods, which worked out well because it kept me grounded in the real world and also made money. But this is a graph of sales over time. So the x-axis, the horizontal axis is time, it's weekly sales. And then the y-axis is volume of sales. And you can see these massive spikes of sales volume. So we're going from something that's out maybe 5,000 units up to 100,000 units. That's insane variation. So you can think about how awful this is for the operations side of the business. This drives cost up like crazy to try to have these inventory and these sales volumes dramatically changing. And it is due to price discounts. So now I'm overlaying in the orange. If you look at the right axis, these are per unit or per ounce. These are prices, and you can see largely that the prices are going down when the volume is going up because these are promotions. So then the question is, well, why do grocery stores offer promotions? In fact, when I was at Kraft, something that struck me is that a guy I was working with calculated annual volume of food items. And he said, Peter, people eat the same amount of peanut butter year round, no matter if we run promotions or not. They're not eating more peanut butter. We're not selling more peanut butter because of promotions. So then the question is, well, why do they do this? So there's a couple of reasons. And this is, again, pricing techniques to make money, and why does it work? One is that you are stealing from the competitor. So Kraft is a manufacturer, whether it's mac and cheese or whatever else they're selling, they may not sell more in a year, but the retailers are stealing customers from other retailers. You come in and maybe you buy peanut butter because you're motivated by that discount. Well, of course, you buy a whole basket of items. Not all of them are on discount. And so retailers generate store traffic. So that's one reason. But the second reason is segmentation. Some people are watching for these sales. They're waiting. Oh, good, my peanut butter's on sale. And so they're buying low, and then they're gonna wait for the next sale. And you know what? You wouldn't really sell peanut butter to them unless it was on sale because they're really looking for the discount. Other people, they're busy. They're not paying attention. They're not clipping coupons in the old era. They're not, I don't know, showing the barcode on their phone in the new era, whatever it is. They're not really worried about timing the promotions. And so they're buying at they're willing to pay high prices. So you're making money from both groups. And so that's a reason for grocers to offer promotions as well. Steal for the retailers, store traffic for the manufacturers, sell higher to the people who are willing to pay higher, sell lower prices to the people who are willing to sell, to buy at low prices. So it works out as a clever trick. But seasonal items are really different. So one of my guest speakers every year, when I have a longer format class, I used to work at Dick's Sporting Goods. That'd be similar to Decathlon. Well, these items, I find it interesting. Promotions are so different in seasonal items. If you think about running a business like Decathlon, your goal is to fill your shelves with sporting goods there for that season, and then sell it all out so you can fill your shelves with the next items. So during baseball season, you have baseball stuff. During track season, or we'll say hockey season or football season. And then there's also weather patterns for those countries that change weather dramatically. You've got coats, or you've got summer running gear. And so, but you don't sell the opposite item in the wrong season. So price discounts here, the question is really depth and timing. If you time your discount too early, you're missing out on sales you would have gotten at higher prices. If you time it too late, well, now your people aren't buying and it sits there and you have to get rid of it in some way. So it's really a very comprehensive data issue, is trying to figure out when to time it so that you make the right amount of money. So that's very different from groceries. So I enjoy that contrast personally. So I think this is my last slide that's wrapping up aspects of pricing, which I find interesting. And so this, with promotions, we have two very different types of retailers. They both are massive. They both get their profits from baskets, so having thousands and thousands of items. But promotions are dramatically different in the way they operate and the data they use and the types of calculations. All right, so this gets us to our time to chat. So there were no questions so far in the chat window, but feel free to send me questions or raise your little hand in the participants window, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
I guess you answered all the questions at the time. No, that can't be true. Come on, folks. Take advantage of Peter here.
I have a question. Hi, Peter. Agustin again. So we were talking about this this week in our behavioral economics class, when we were talking about prices and why consumers buy certain goods. And the issue kind of arose a lot of times that it's not clear what the consumer wants all the time. So the seller oftentimes tries to prime potential consumers into trying to find, I don't know, the iPhone with the most storage, even if we're not sure that we wanted the iPhone with the most storage in the first place. But the sellers tried to kind of bombard us with that. And then we started talking about a little bit how not knowing or making it hard to understand what it is we value in certain goods, how that even makes it a larger issue when we're trying to find what price we would be willing to pay for a good if we don't even know how much we truly value it. So I don't know if I have a clear question, but sort of in new products or in products, and you talked a little bit about differentiation, in products that are so new or so novel, maybe Netflix when it came out as a streaming device, how do companies assess a price that, as you said, the consumer will find there's benefit in it, so they're willing to pay for it? In other words, when you don't have competition to kind of say, I want to fall here in the middle in that 2x2 game theory example, how do you set a price from the beginning? Did you just go to cost and put a markup over that? Do you do an experiment? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Right. Well, that's a great question. We know we can't do econometrics because we don't have any past data in this type of setting. So we are going to need to ask consumers or customers in some fashion. If this were a business-to-business item where in a setting where your new product was very functional, it was a new material that was lighter weight, but still had this, we'll say, strength properties of the old material, and so shipping was cheaper. Well, you could run calculations of how much money that buyer would buy based on their own purchase volumes. And then you have meetings to try to convince them that you're right. And in that case, you set this whole thing up with uncertainty. In that case, I just reduce the uncertainty, and so that's a lot easier. Okay, well that's not what you really asked. Now let's say still B2B, and you're selling, the uncertainty might be, let's say you're selling them in a safety product. And the safety product doesn't have certainty on it. It's will they ever need this product? And so you can show them some statistics on other businesses and how frequently accidents have occurred, but it's still really kind of hard to convince that buyer that it's going to happen with them, because they're going to tell you that, no, my workers, we have safety, we take precautions, we train, it won't happen to us no matter what. Now, so again, so we're getting to uncertainty here, but still that example is a little easier because you can still calculate with data. Their data exists on what's the cost of an accident, what's the probability of an accident, and so you can still work with numbers. Moving one more to uncertainty to a very consumer product. The consumers are going to give you better guesses for their own preferences the more realistic your scenario is. So if you're asking, what if, imagine that you were buying, or imagine you're in a scenario and you just do it, we'll say verbally versus show them some photos. If you show them what the new product is going to look like, or some mock-ups or some prototypes, they're going to be a lot better at imagining and interacting and pretending. Years ago, I got to work with a truck manufacturer. They were designing a new interior for their trucks. They built mock-ups that looked right, and they got truckers to walk in. But they didn't just say, walk in and look at this. They said, walk in, now imagine that you're making a sandwich. Where do you keep the bread? Where do you keep the peanut butter? Now, like, what are you gonna do? And so somebody would like sit on their bed and try to make their sandwich. And it was only by living out scenarios that these customers could really begin to forecast which one they liked better. Because visually walking in, one of the trucks had loft, it looked cool. But once they started acting out life in that environment, they realized this is inconvenient. Looks cool, but I'm gonna hate it in the end. So the answer is yes, experiments, and you do your best to try to give people a taste or an experience of what that would be like so they can forecast more accurately than otherwise. Still gonna have uncertainty. This is just a way to try to reduce it more than otherwise.
Thank you.
All right, so we have global. I see Lauren wrote in a question about globally different strategies here. I think the global depends on the local environment. So you have different strategies because there might be different contexts in markets. Example that I loved hearing from Saturday, one of my students told me that Wakut petrol station has these barcodes to where you can pay digitally for your fuel. And locally in Doha, it saves a lot of citizens and businesses money because they have drivers who go fill up their tank, and some drivers will say are unethical and get the fuel station to write out a fake invoice of that they actually bought more fuel. And now with digital payments, that unethical loss is gone. It's erased. What you pay for is, what you bought is what you get. So that doesn't seem to be a good idea in a self-service environment like the United States, where, except for New Jersey, we're filling up our own tanks. That's an example of things work based on the context. So that's my quick answer is some cases you're adapting, in some cases it's similar. Jeffy, price war topic. If a competitor keeps the price low for a prolonged period because they can afford to, what will be the best strategy for me in order to get out of the war, out of the loss? Yeah, so deep pockets could keep the price low. The typical answer, there's not a whole lot of good examples of this that I know of in reality playing out, but it's the cost of re-entering. So what if I'm battling somebody who's rich, how about I exit, leave the business for a while, and as soon as they have their prices go back high, I re-enter. So that's one way. If I'm the small fish against a big fish, hopefully I can exit and come back in. But if you have less power than a competitor and you're in a commodity business, you're in a hard place. Really, that's a challenging business. So maybe another idea is think of opportunity cost. Can you take your capital and get in a different business? I don't know, but I would agree that's a very challenging situation.
Thank you.
Hi, Professor Boatwright. I have a question. I'm not sure if you already covered it because I came a little late, but I'm wondering about how pricing works in terms of stores in Qatar. Like if I buy a product from Sephora in the US, it'll be cheaper than if I buy a product from Sephora in Qatar. And so I'm wondering, how is that change in price or price markup rationalized? Does it have to do with GDP per capita? Because Qatar just generally people have higher salaries. Maybe they can afford that price markup. And so I was hoping you could maybe answer some of those questions for me. Thank you.
Sure. I think that's a very real situation that's become more and more aggravated as, we'll just say, the internet. Even though the internet's old, the more and more we operate in a digital setting, the more these kinds of questions come up. So it's not just across country boundaries, but I know that Dick's Sporting Goods, they see lots of examples of people walking in with their phones. They're standing at the shelf, they're looking at prices of competitors or on Dick's own website. Do I buy Dick's online or do I buy Dick's in the store? Wait a minute, why aren't these the same? It's the same company. So there is a lot of pressure for companies to really try to rationalize and bring so it's sensical and makes sense, because otherwise buyers are gonna take advantage of these discrepancies. For you all in Doha, a natural one would be shipping. If you were going to try to buy lower and ship it from the United States, maybe it ends up being the same price in the end because of all, and then there's time. It's a pain to look around and try to calculate the shipping and So that to me is the easiest way the company could decide on prices would be to think about the cost to you as an alternative. And then in essence, maybe they're even cheaper than having you order from the United States and pay the shipping. You get this benefit, it's already there in front of you. You don't have to take that time, you don't have to wait on it, it's immediate. Great question. All right, well, with that, maybe there's one last question because I have class in 10 minutes. So I'm, but if there's somebody who had a question.
Do you want to comment at all about Silicon Valley in comparison, say, to Doha? I mean, you sort of span 3 regions here. Are there important differences we should think of?
In terms of pricing or in terms of what, George?
Just culture, and that's too broad, I know, but I'm probably getting off topic. Never mind.
That's fine. I think so highly of your campus. I just am amazed that you have still the Carnegie Mellon rigor at the same time as such a strong community, the investing in one another. So I miss being with you. I look forward to coming back, but you do great. It's really a very good campus. There is one last question that was sent to me privately in a chat. Let me cover that and then we'll close. So the question is you know, we'll say for luxury items where you have a Prada hoodie at what some of us would call ungodly prices, but it is exclusive. Not many people will be able to showcase that and wear that. And so what's pricing like in that particular context? I mean, you might even want about ethical considerations as well. But the question was pretty generic of what do we do with this? Let's just take the benefit that the customer is getting of exclusivity. All right, that they've got something that nobody else has. That is of value. It turns out people, many people, like having this uniqueness. Now, the value of that uniqueness is pretty hard to quantify because it's going to vary across individuals. You can do some experiments to try to guess at it, but it is going to vary. So I'll at least say that there is that price is serving a purpose to give someone that opportunity to be unique or to be separate. How much they're willing to pay, we see in the marketplace how these things work out. But that would be, to me, the argument for the high price there is the benefit is uniqueness, exclusivity. And the sweatshirt makes more sense than, I remember in the earliest iPhone, there was an app that came out that was the I Am Rich app. I don't know if any of you remember that, but it was an app that was, I don't remember the price. Let's call it $200. Maybe it was $1,000. And all it was on your phone. It was a I am rich. It didn't do anything. It just sat on your phone and so that you could be exclusive. Now, Apple actually removed that from their platform, is that they felt like that was not something that they wanted to support. But there you go. That kind of thing would exist in our varied marketplace. All right, well, with that enjoyable memory, I do need to go off to other class, but thanks for taking time. It's good to see you, and stay in touch, please.
It's great to see you too. Thanks for taking the time. Hope we get you back here.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.